It's 1 o'clock. What's going on? So it's virtually 1 o'clock. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And it's the second show of our 2020-2021 fall season, pre-recorded podcast. And a special show, we're going to be talking about Latin American studies here with the co-directors of the Latin American Studies Option Seminar, which is a National Endowment for the Humanities grant. And my guests, Dr. Maria Hernandez of the Education and Language Acquisition Department, Dr. Rebecca Talley of the Social Science Department, and Dr. Will Fulton of the Humanities Department. I also share that title of co-director, and so I'll be talking a little bit as well as running the interview. But why don't we start with Dr. Hernandez? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, coming to LaGuardia, studies, and I think you'd like to talk a little bit about the grant right out of the gate, right? So take it away, Ana Maria.
I have a master's and a doctorate in comparative literature with a concentration in Latin American studies, and I have been a fellow of the Billner Center for Western Hemisphere Studies at the Graduate Center since 2005, where I am in touch with other program directors of Latin American studies and many of the graduate students. I first came to LaGuardia in 1972 as co-founder of Modern Languages in the Division of Language and Culture, which a few years later split into English and Humanities, and of course, Modern Languages stayed with Humanities. In 1974, I was hired as a full-time member of the faculty to develop the culture component of the associate degree in bilingual education, our first education program, which trained students for the public school system in New York. Latin American studies predated the social movements of the 60s, but really flourished in the later 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we did not have such a program at LaGuardia. So in 1982, since those programs at the time were usually housed either in modern languages or in social science or any kind of combination for both, Gilberto Arroyo from social science in the field of economics and I got together. And since the culture courses had already been developed for the bilingual education program, we concentrated on our first grant in developing the social science courses in anthropology, sociology, history, and political science. So that was a success. It was a 2-year grant. And the program did very well in the first 15 years. It flourished with an average. It was never a huge program, but we had between 80 and 100 students regularly until somehow in the 20s, in the 2000s, around the turn of the century, the social science arm of the program was withering because we did not have a full-timer. Gilberto retired, and then Joan Reitano of the social science also retired. So basically, most of the courses offered were in humanities, where I still was. So then there had also been changes in the discipline, rather than just social science and language and literature, the arts. The visual arts started to play a very prominent role in Latin American studies. So since I was still in humanities, we got the second grant, a very small grant, only 1 year, a focus grant to develop the influence of the African influence on the development of Latin American music. And that was the first version of HUM 107, the course that Will and Ryan and others worked on. Now, we continued to run the courses, but again, after a while, it was the music course ran a couple of times. So after a while, it was mostly just the courses in education and language acquisition, which had become a department in 2005. So fortunately, then we had Hugo Fernandez, who from photography, who was in the field of Latin American studies. And then in 2015, we were fortunate to finally have Rebecca come to us as a full-timer with a distinguished credentials in history. And Hugo with a series of exhibits about Latin American themes, and Rebecca completely revived the course into history of Latin America and the Caribbean, which now has runs regularly. We got together then with this idea that we should continue to revise the program to reflect changes in the field, namely the prominent role that art, music, photography, and film were playing in Latin American studies. So we had a series of meetings with Rebecca and Shannon Proctor from Humanities and I, and we revised the curriculum. And we were talking about the absence of courses in humanities disciplines. So this is again where William and Hugo came on in 2016, at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, with this idea: why don't we write a grant to really bring the discipline up to a par? And I think I have exceeded my 5 minutes, but they can now, I brought us up to a point when we all got together to write this grant to reflect the voices that were left out of the literary canon and of the written archives, the voices that speak through music, through art, through film, and through photography. And I'll stop there and go on.
Okay, well, why don't we give Rebecca an opportunity now. Rebecca, you want to talk a little bit about yourself, your background studies, coming to LaGuardia, and if you'd like to chime in on some aspects of the grant history, so to speak.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to start with not so much my academic credentials, but rather a very, very brief story of a time between high school and college, because I think one of the questions a lot of people ask me is, how did this, girl from Ohio with no connection to Latin America, any kind of family background that I know of, how did I become interested in Latin America in the first place? And I think obviously there's lots of influence, but there's one particular thing I can sort of pinpoint, an origin story, which historians like, I guess. But and that was, I was on a train in Europe I was bumming around Europe. I know nowadays they call it a gap year. This for me was like a gap 2 years, so I don't know if I can call it a gap year, but bumming around, and I was in a train and I met some people from Peru. So we started talking, and of course you ask one of the first questions, I asked them where they're from. They said Peru. Oh, that's really cool. And then they asked me where I was from, and I said I'm from America. And they were like, oh, what part of America? And I said, well, Ohio, America? No, like America, like what part? I was like, America. And they're like, well, we're from America too. And it was so that it launched this conversation, right, about what America means. And I'd never thought at any point, I was 20, right? I'd never thought at all about this word America and where it came from and its history. And I became very inspired, and I thought, that's really fascinating. I'm not going to call myself American anymore until I've learned more about the rest of the Americas, right? But then I realized in order to do that, I was going to need to learn Spanish, right, or some other language so I could talk to the other people who also were from America. And that's kind of where it sort of, you could say it started. I went to Spain. I studied Spanish for a couple of months. I knew nothing before I went. I could say, gracias, hola, vaso de vino, vaso de cerveza, glass of beer, glass of wine, like the most important things, and that was it. And then, I did some study in undergraduate, some Spanish language study, but was unsatisfied with how, much I progressed. So then after I graduated with the BA, I went to Mexico and lived there for a couple of years. And there, it's, that's where they really taught me how to speak Spanish there. Eventually, I ended up doing a master's degree in Latin American studies at New York University. And then from there, I went to Cornell and did a PhD in Latin American history. So while I lived in Mexico for several years, my academic research focuses on Colombia. So history, sort of, the history of economic development in Colombia. And eventually that led me eventually to LaGuardia, and so that's sort of my short background there. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the history of the program itself, I was really excited when I first got here and met Anna Maria and saw that, it definitely was clear to me that there was definitely a gap, in the social science department. There really weren't a lot of people focusing specifically on issues of Latin America from different disciplinary perspectives. And so I was excited to meet Anna Maria and then work with Shannon a bit. I remember my first year, there's very, LaGuardia, there's a lot going on. It was very confusing. Like, there's so many things happening, but I was really and get to know her and think about how to revitalize the program. And then, of course, the grant's been a really wonderful experience. I've really enjoyed working with Anna Maria and with Will and with Hugo. It's been so much fun. Lots of challenges and lots of excitement. And I really feel like the program has just really done a lot to enrich Latin American studies at LaGuardia. And I'm really looking forward to deepening LaGuardia's commitment to this very important area of studies at college.
Very good. Will, Will is actually a returning guest. He was on the show when you folks in the music area had put together your concert for the spring. But it's always good to talk a little bit about yourself to get the audience warmed up.
So I come from to this group from a very different place, which is that I'm not a Latin Americanist. I'm not a specialist in Latin America by any means. My involvement in LaGuardia came about before I went to graduate school. I was in the music business and worked both as a record producer and at record companies in New York. During that time, I was also a DJ in New York. Being a record producer, working at record companies, or being a DJ in New York, all share one thing in common: is you're exposed to all the great, wonderful music that the city has to offer, which includes a lot of genres that would be defined as Latin American or Latinx genres. That was my gateway into this meeting came from the music. When I got to LaGuardia, there were only 2 courses running in the liberal arts category. As a music historian, I went back to school after the music business, and I got my PhD in musicology from the CUNY Graduate Center. And there were only, I took a number of ethnomusicology, or what we call world music classes in graduate school. But then I got to LaGuardia, and there were only 2 courses running in the liberal arts department for music. There was a course called Intro to Music, which is a pretty standard kind of music appreciation that is taught in many colleges, but focuses on the Western classical tradition. There was a course called American Music that focuses on jazz, blues, rock, rap, etc. But there was nothing about Latin American music. There was a course called Music of Latin America that one of our faculty, Professor Gustavo Moreto, put together, but it had never run. And it wasn't in pathways, and it wasn't in good shape to run. And so I had been looking for a way to expand my own knowledge about Latin American culture, history, music. And I was putting together a world music course that involved a section on Latin American genres and styles, but nothing that was comprehensive. And Hugo came to my office and said, "Hey, we should put together a grant for the NEH." And I thought, "But me? I'm not a Latin Americanist." And he said, "Yes, but this grant is about for Latin Americanists and people who are interested in expanding their own knowledge." And I said, "Well, that definitely that second part definitely sounds like me." And so I joined up with this team of faculty who know a lot more than I do about the subject. And it's been a great experience. I've learned a lot, and we now, the Latin American Music of Latin America course is running in its 2nd semester with the second faculty teaching it, both of whom are much more prepared and much more skilled in this subject matter than I am. And I'm glad that the course is running, and I wish I had time to audit it. So that's a little bit about me and how I got involved.
I'm going to just chime in for a minute and talk a little bit because since I am co-director, but I'm host of the show, so I'm wearing multiple hats. I just want to talk about this idea of, when you look back at your history, when you're in it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but then you can look back and you can see the threads. So, the fact that Will and I had worked previously on bringing Joe Conzo Jr., this very famous photographer from the South Bronx, to perform, and that being through Will's interest in him having documented the hip hop generation. But he also had this other thread, which was New York salsa through his father, Joe Conzo Sr., who's going to be a guest on the show coming up soon. And so we brought Joe in, and that brought the entire Tito Puente background into it. So we already, so when I was looking around for somebody to do this grant, we already had this kind of thread that we had begun. And of course, the grant itself, I would have never have even considered applying for it if it wasn't because I wanted to work with Ana Maria, who to me has, always been like a mentor, kind of a lion here at LaGuardia. And of course, it was Ana Maria who brought Rebecca in, who has really kind of filled it out for us as far as, because, one of the things that is unique to Latin American studies, well, let's say it's one of the aspects of it here at LaGuardia is that, it's not housed in one department, that it is distributed between many departments. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that the entire process of applying for the grant, just a little bit. If folks want to just talk about that experience when we writing this thing. Sure, go ahead.
Just for a second, is for me, it was something that when Hugo came to me, I thought, well, like an NEH grant, it was not something that I had been involved in before, and it was a process that I was intimidated by. I didn't know what we were in for as far as writing a grant or putting a grant together. The only grants that I had put together were small research grants for myself, requests for graduate school or something to go, study something in a library or something. But this was a big undertaking. And so it was really, that was just the thing I wanted to say is that I was very intimidated by it. And for anybody listening, if you're faculty or anybody that's thinking about this and you think, well, and a National Endowment for the Humanities grant, that sounds so big. It's definitely something that if you have an interest in going for a grant, you should definitely do it because it's a lot more possible than you might realize.
And the grants office makes it, there's just make it possible with their support in it. But if obviously Ana Maria had a history with these grants as well. My history with grants I think I'd gotten a small grant from the State Department. So I had at least a federal grant experience, but if I don't, it wouldn't have been possible without Dr. Hernandez. And Rebecca, who is the one who always she writes, she's a writer and a rewriter. So whereas Ana Maria, a lot of times, she could just channel the language. Rebecca was really great about, organizing it and whatever you want to say, putting the music to it, in a sense. Did you want to talk a little bit about what it was like for you to write this grant, Rebecca?
Well, I'll say a few things, I guess, or a few things. I just wanted also just to sort of piggyback on what Will was saying, and especially for LaGuardia faculty who might be listening, I think that, LaGuardia does have a pretty good track record, at least with the NEH. I'm sure with other large granting institutions, I think it has a good track record as well. And I think that it has partly just the quality, the high quality faculty that's at LaGuardia, shout out to us. But, the institution itself, the support that we get from the grants office, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of reasons why that happens. So I would second what Will is saying, right? That it can seem intimidating, but to definitely go for it, right? For me, I think, I guess I wasn't as intimidated by the process. I don't know. Not everyone knows this about me, but before I went to graduate school, there was, I talked about my gap year, which was actually a gap 4 years, right? I think this is one of the things I actually really like, kind of connecting with my students about the fact that I did not have a traditional path through higher education, like many of our students do here as well, right? There was 4 years between between when I finished high school and started college, and some of that was, I call it being a bum in Europe. That isn't exactly what I was doing, but I definitely wasn't studying. So, and then others was just working, in Ohio. But I also had a chunk of time between finishing my bachelor's degree and going to get a master's degree. There was about an 8-year period that I did a variety of different kinds of jobs and tried to build different sorts of careers for myself. But one thing I was doing consistently was working for nonprofit organizations in Mexico and in New York City as a grant writer. So I did actually have a fair amount of experience writing grants before for organizations applying for something. So I wasn't quite as intimidated by the process. But I did find, it was, I think it's interesting, right? When it's sort of, you're the grant writer, you're the grant writer at an organization, and you're working with different program people to collect the information about what they're doing, and then you kind of turn it into your own grant proposal, and it gets submitted to the foundation, obviously in conjunction with the program people that you're working with. But here it was, it was a much more collaborative process of writing the proposal itself, and so that was it was both interesting and fascinating and challenging, right, to see like how all of our different visions, which I had, I think at the beginning for me it was like, whoa, like we're talking about so many things, and how do we make this into a coherent whole? It was a little challenging with, again, just I think different people coming with different ideas about what the grant should look like. But I feel like I don't know, I thought it worked really well in the end, right? Like we came up with a really good vision, and it was fun. I mean, I do enjoy grant writing, right? So it was kind of fun to sort of pull all of our visions together and to make it something that was coherent and obviously successful. The NEH liked it too.
Yes, Ana Maria would like to get a word in here about this, and then it'll take us to our halfway mark.
I just wanted to second what Rebecca said about LaGuardia having a very good track record, and also a very good track record in interdisciplinary grants with NEH, because we had the collaboration of humanities and English, and then also social science and English. So we had a track record. NEH grants are not usually easy to get. The number is about 18% get funded. But when you have successful grants and recent grants, I mean, the grants for philosophy and English and then social science were basically just before we applied for ours. And so there was a recognition there from NEH about the projects that came from LaGuardia and were completed successfully. So that was important too.
Yeah, we're somewhere near the halfway mark here of the podcast. So I just wanted to say you're watching and listening to WLGR LaGuardia Web Radio. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and my guests today are Dr. Ana Maria Hernandez of the Education and Language Acquisition Department, Dr. Rebecca Talley of the Social Science Department, and Dr. Will Fulton of the Humanities Department. And we're talking about the Latin American Option Seminar, which is the benefactor of a 3-year National Endowment for the Humanities grant. And we probably should, at this point, start talking a little bit about, because we're in the 3rd year of the program, but the first 2 years were the years where we got the opportunity to work with faculty from around the college. So here's where we talk about the greatest hits of that experience. Who'd like to start? Ana Maria?
Well, I think I think somebody from humanities should start, because their greatest accomplishments, I think, were the development of the music course that has been running twice, the art course, which will be running soon. I mean, it was developed by Liena and sent to Pathways by Ariane.
Liena Weisman and Ariane Fernandez, who are both faculty in humanities.
And then also, I think the social science, the SSH 232, I think the offerings in that course, correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, I think
Is this the anthropology course that Ryan Mann Hamilton wrote, or?
His history of Latin American and the Caribbean. Yeah. And then there is also the anthropology course that was revised, that was part of that grant from 1982, but again, it had, I think it ran 2 or 3 times. And I think the new courses, the courses in Spanish are always run because there are a number of programs that have them on the course. So actually what we were focusing on were the courses in humanities and social science, because social science had always been a foundational discipline in Latin American studies and humanities in the past 25 years. So actually most of the accomplishments were in those areas. And another huge accomplishment is getting fellows from other departments as well, not just our 3 departments, but also the Department of English or other disciplines such as reading, etc., who made very important contributions to those seminars, very enriching presentations for everybody to benefit.
Okay, well, and we should try to mention those names as we go along, but Rebecca, do you want to talk a little bit about the history course and how you revitalized that?
I'm sorry, Will looked like he wanted to jump in for a second there, so I just wanted to.
Hugo, you had just started to say something about humanities, and I wanted to just mention about a little bit about the for people to understand what the grant was itself. So the grant is a 3-year grant, and the National Endowment, the Humanities, we organized the grant into 2 CTL seminars, through 2 Center for Teaching and Learning seminars, year-long seminars that had 10. Am I right that we had 10 in both? I think maybe we had an 11.
Might have even had more. Yeah, I think we at least started with 11 or so.
So, but our organization was to have monthly meetings with 10 faculty members who wanted to strengthen their own courses, their own come up with new assignments, strengthen their own courses, put courses through pathways, and so they could be enriched. It was enriching Latin American Studies. LaGuardia was the title, so that they could be enriched within the seminar, and that enrichment also included public events for students. In the first year event, and I'll talk a little bit about the first year and then hand it off. Rebecca, I didn't want to interrupt. It sounded like, but just to mention that we had the first year event, we started out with Professor Edward Sullivan, who came and talked about the language of objects in the art in Americas. Professor Jerry Carlson, who came and talked about Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Latin American cinema. We had Dr. Drum and Papo Vasquez, who came for a day of music celebration and music and education on the students about bamba and salsa during Hispanic Heritage Month. And then we had Dr. Angelina Talash. I had Anna Maria's name in my mind. Angelina Talash, who came and spoke about Dominican popular music and gender issues that year too. And each one of these speakers and lectures was supported by the grant and provided an opportunity for the students to engage directly in the seminar's proceedings, but also then each one of these professors, after we had an open meeting with the students, we then met with faculty, and at the faculty meeting, the faculty got to ask additional questions with the idea that they would go on and use some of what they've learned within their lessons in classes, within their curriculums, and that was the first year. So the structure of the first year centered around art, around film, and around music. Rebecca, would you like to, and we talked about other topics as well, I want to make sure I'm not missing something, but Rebecca, would you like to go on and talk about the second year?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the second year, the primary focus was history and literature, and a similar format, with a monthly seminar where we would discuss a variety of different kinds of readings, particularly I always liked reading primary source texts. We didn't always read them, but when we did, it was always very fruitful discussions. And the same thing, we had a variety of different speakers who came. The first one, as I recall, was Dr. Marcela Echeverri from Yale University, who came and spoke about indigenous and Afro-Colombian politics during the revolutionary, the era of the revolutionary period in Latin America, so particularly in southern Colombia and Ecuador. And her book was really a fascinating and very detailed analysis of sort of local level politics among indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities. And so it's very, very fascinating work that she has. Our second speaker was Dr. Rolena Adorno, also from Yale, who came and spoke about Guaman de Poma, so a really fascinating chronicle written in the 16th century that really just gives you a remarkable indigenous voice of life in Peru in the 16th century, and sort of and she did a really wonderful talk. I think students in attendance really enjoyed it. I know faculty definitely did. Then we had oh my goodness, Dr. Ada Ferrer from New York University, who came and spoke about Martí. And again, that was a standing room only event. There was, there was a packed auditorium, and again, she's a great speaker, and it's a really fascinating topic, to talk about, Jose Martí and his writings, his connections to New York City, his whole concepts of, Nuestra America. I mean, it was a really fascinating talk and very, very well attended. And then finally, we had Dr. Kirsten Weld, who came from Harvard University, and she spoke about archives and dictatorship in Guatemala. Her talk was, extremely successful. I think, folks, both students, I had students who attended, and they talked about it for weeks afterward. Faculty members talked about it for weeks afterward. She did her research focuses on the discovery of a sort of secret archive by the Guatemalan police that was produced by maintained by the Guatemalan police during the Guatemalan Civil War. And it's a really eye-opening and fascinating trove of records. And she talks about, her research talks about not only the records themselves, but also how history itself is produced using these kinds of records, how narratives about dictatorship get shaped. So it was a fascinating talk. Again, also very well attended and extremely successful. So again, we had some wonderful speakers, and as Will said, right, there was definitely some interest and desire on the part of faculty to incorporate different aspects of things that we had read and discussed and seen during the seminar into their courses or their syllabi. There were a couple of I think it's important we talk about a lot of the syllabi, like that were either revised or created from scratch through participants' participation in the seminar. But there were also a number of really fascinating and interesting assignments that different faculty produced as well. So not an entire course, but just really great stuff. I mean, there's two that kind of stand out to me. So the first one was oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name? Robert from Humanities. Roberto. Oh my goodness.
Roberto
Why am I
Ruiz.
drawing a blank on?
Roberto Ruiz.
Thank you. So in Humanities, so who does who focuses on philosophy, and his look at Las Casas, debate between Las Casas and Sepúlveda. I thought that his presentation, the assignment that he produced was really fascinating. That was really well done. And then another one that I also liked was the one that, and again, Jose Favara in English produced about Rigoberta Menchú, right? So looking at her narratives and asking students to reflect on her narratives. I thought that was another really well done assignment. There were some very nice ones the students the faculty participants came up with. Oh, and the other one I also wanted to mention that I forgot as well was Dr. Ryan Van Hamilton from the Social Science Department in his courses. So one of the things that we read was a short excerpt by Jose Vasconcelos, who was a Mexican philosopher, thinker, / member of the Ministry of Education in Mexico. Well, not member, but the director of it, who wrote this fascinating and much debated essay in about the cosmic race, right? So about sort of racial issues in Mexico, and so we read excerpts of it in the seminar, and Dr. Nan Hamilton later incorporated it into his own classes. And he described very intriguing conversations that resulted, right? Because it's an interesting essay on the one hand, in that it sort of thinks about a new kind of race that would emerge from he's sort of Vasconcelos talking about the racial mixing and what this would mean for human history in general. But of course he was also has what we would definitely call very conservative ideas about race. So there's an interesting exploration. But anyway, all of these different assignments that faculty have introduced into their courses are sort of, again, another result of the grant. So I know I've talked a bit, so I'll let Ana Maria speak now.
Well, before you get on there, I just wanted to mention that we should probably also mention that this grant leveraged other grants like the Humanities Alliance, which actually helped us put together some of our events for Hispanic heritage. That we also work with the photography department, who brought in a Colombian photographer who was documenting the FARC. That was a good event. And that we work closely with the Latinx committee, which Rebecca is co-chair of. So one of the things I think that was kind of great is that how our grant got to mix with all these other grants and really talk up the Latinx and Latin American studies at the campus. And I just mentioned to you that we are moving into the last quarter hour of the show. But I'll let Dr. Hernandez, she's excited, so go ahead.
I am. No, I just wanted to acknowledge, again, the previous grant, a previous grant with Humanities and English, Dr. Richard Brown, in which I had participated, about artificial intelligence and humanism, because the format that we used was the one that they had used, to have a prominent scholar give a public lecture and then a private seminar to the participants. And that was, I remember when I took that seminar in artificial intelligence, how much I enjoyed it, to have these world-class Ivy League professors come and address the students, very good role models for the students, a very good example of what they would have to, the kind of academic discourse they will encounter as they move on to the bachelor's and the master's. And that actually, it's not something that we came up with ourselves, but that had actually been modeled successfully with the previous NEH grants. And they should be recognized for that. But also we have talked about the faculty, but also the students. The students who came to these lectures were very much impressed. They were electrified. There is a vision of what is out there in the field. The diversity of the scholars that we had, also the diversity of points of view, different points of view that indicate the kind of the complexity in the field, but also the changes in the field over the past 25 years. Again, has been an important experience for all of us who participated and the students of professors who participated as fellows.
Yeah, Naomi Stubbs, by the way, also worked with Dr. Brown on that. So yes, just a shout out to her, who has gotten successive NEH grants. And again, all these things make us competitive as a college, but not to mention that we are a Hispanic serving institution. And many times that designation is used to get grants which may not necessarily directly respond to Hispanic issues necessarily, except as they apply to all other students at the college, whether it's socioeconomic or not. So I think one of the exciting things is that we were competitive for this grant and that we responded directly to the population that made it possible here at the college, which is, I think at this time, it may still be 49% Hispanic. So as I said before, we're pretty much in the last piece of the show. So really, we typically talk about the future. So we are in year 3 of the grant. And I don't know if folks would like to talk about that, where we're at with that process. Anybody? I mean, one of the things we could talk about is the articulation agreements and how we've been fighting to make, enhanced transfer for all of our students at John Jay. We're now working with one at Brooklyn College now. Anybody want to mention that, Anna Maria?
Yeah, so Will and I participated. I mean, we didn't want to wait for a time when everybody was available, because this is just an intermediate step. But actually, the interest of the Chancellor in ethnic studies and articulating existing programs across the board has played an important point in accelerating these processes, which are usually lengthy and cumbersome. But now, I think because of the emphasis on consolidating and connecting, all those programs has been very helpful, because usually it's the sending college that has to push, and then the receiving college is the one that slows down. And then in the last meeting, it was Will, as you remember, because you were there, it was basically the other way around. They said, okay, no, let's do this, and they are actually very much interested in finalizing Brooklyn College, very much interested in finalizing the process. And we expect actually to finalize articulation with Brooklyn College within a month. And then we have to go back to John Jay. And then at our last meeting, a few days ago, we were talking about other possible colleges for articulation. Will, do you want to? You are muted. You're muted, Will. You're muted.
Or Rebecca.
I was just saying that, just going on to say that we don't want to get too deep into it, but we're going to be discussing articulation with other CUNY campuses. My inner lawyer stepped out and said, okay, well, let's keep some things under wraps until we go forward.
For a player to be named later,
yes,
as they say in baseball. Yeah. Rebecca?
I mean, I don't know how much more I can add to what Anna Maria already said. I think other than the fact that I think, I enjoyed the process. We started in January and February meeting with faculty from Brooklyn College and John Jay. And I really appreciated that, how interesting when we, with Brooklyn College, how much, how well our course, how well our programs of Latin American studies, oops, sorry, there, the wind's blowing, how well our programs really aligned. And I really feel that, there were a lot of courses that we had at LaGuardia that had sort of almost exact matches at Brooklyn College. And, this again, I think is a result, to a significant degree of this is one of the results of the grant, right? That we were able to produce so many, to enrich a variety of courses that are being offered and that are actually being offered in Latin American studies here at LaGuardia, not just on the books, right? So it was really nice to see, how well our program, fits with and tracks with, what the program that they have at Brooklyn College, and hopefully, as Will points out, will allow us to, coordinate very nicely and articulate very effectively with other colleges as well. So that was really nice, and I hope. It was unfortunate that COVID slowed the process down.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting as our grant winds down. Now the Mellon Foundation grant, which has come to CUNY, $10 million to focus on ethnic studies and African American studies. Hopefully we can, slide into that experience and just keep building the momentum for the area. And for me, it's been important because I identify with our population. I think at about their age, I was not in touch with my Latinness as much as I feel like I could have been. And so to have this, if I'd have had, what I'm saying is if I'd have had this kind of energy around me, things might have happened a little faster for me. So I think that's, for me, that's one of the most important things, is that not only for faculty, but obviously that extends to the student experience. We've been able to bring this much, information and experience to our students, both the Latino and non-Latino, because we know it's all mixed together here. But we're about the point where we should probably be saying our last thoughts and thank yous. Anybody want to start to the audience or anyone else?
Can Can I just pick up actually where you right where you left off, Hugo?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate what you're saying, right? That feeling that you weren't connected to, you know, your heritage, your Latinness. You know, one of the things that I find that I have found to be really, really wonderful about teaching at LaGuardia is, you know, being able to, you know, in the Latin American history courses, right? It's really an opportunity to, you know, give the students, you know, the Latinx and Latin American, you know, students who come from Latin America and the Caribbean, you know, the opportunity to really, you know, see themselves represented in the course, right? Directly, fully, like this is all about you, right? This is about you, your heritage, your family, your histories, and you know, students have remarked in the courses at the end of it, right? Like they feel really proud of being Puerto Rican in ways that they weren't when they started the course, right? So, so I appreciate that you say, you know, what you're saying, you know, Hugo, about that connection and how important that is for students to have that opportunity to connect with this kind of material. In order to make those kinds of connections with themselves, right, with their identity, with their family, with their background. So I don't know, other than I'm looking forward to continuing to find ways for all of us to collaborate, to continue to strengthen and deepen and enhance the program. And adelante.
Last words, Will?
I just want to say that I feel very grateful to be involved in a project. You know, I have a lot of colleagues, friends and colleagues who work at other colleges and universities that don't step outside of their disciplines, that don't step outside of their programs, that are very insular, and everything that they do is very insular. And, you know, we throw the word interdisciplinary around a lot, but this is really amazing, the amount of reach that we're able to have across the college of people that are teaching all kinds of different courses and all kinds of different subjects and disciplines, and it's been a great experience. And this is, you know, getting involved in a grant like that, like this, really allows for it. But also, it's I just want to put forward that it's very much the culture of LaGuardia. You know, the culture of LaGuardia is people are, you know, constantly, you know, getting involved in different projects with different people across the campus, and it's been great to do this. Shout outs, for one shout out, I should just say, Naomi Stubbs' name was mentioned. She definitely, when it came to putting together the budget for the grant, she definitely showed me what they had done. She gave me advice early on. So quick shout out to Naomi.
Last words, Anna Maria?
Well, I am glad you mentioned Naomi. I did not mean not to include her. I just had a blackout of the name, just as Rebecca did before. You know, we are, so I did not mean. She is very important, and when we went to the meeting, remember, she is worshipped in the office. She was there, all her accomplishments, her name, her picture, so she has been very important. Representing LaGuardia at the National Endowment for the Humanities. My last word would be that we can segue into this ethnic studies initiative of CUNY, which would imply uniting our programs. You know, as Will indicated and Rebecca indicated, we have discovered through this articulation agreement how our courses match other courses that are out there, and that's important, so that we can channel our students, the ones that begin with us, that we can point them all the way up even to the PhD. That from here, you can go to these CUNY colleges, and then there are the master's programs, and then there are the doctoral programs. The ones at our own graduate center, there are masters, but that is something that we should look forward to also, pointing them to the master's program in Latin American Studies at the graduate center and the doctoral program, to really have students, as you say, make connections and broaden and deepen their knowledge of Latin American studies for the next generations. And this is something that is very inspiring. And that's why I keep going after so many years. It's very inspiring, and I want to thank the three of you for this shared journey, which has been so fruitful, even if there were times when, there were times that the little glitches about this, the food didn't come, the equipment didn't run, but it was all worth it. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. for this shared project.
And there will be time again for this as we work towards the final report and things like that. But I just want to thank my guests today, Dr. Maria Hernandez of the Education Language Acquisition Department, Dr. Rebecca Talley of the Social Science Department, and Dr. Will Fulton of the Humanities Department. We've been talking about the Latin American Options Seminar, which was a 3-year grant funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. We'd like to thank the federal government for that and all those folks in Washington that support the NEH for these dollars, which made this grant possible. And just talking in general about Latin American studies here at LaGuardia, which is so important to our students, 49% Hispanic, but to all students, because global learning is one of our goals here at LaGuardia. And I also wanted to do a quick shout out to Christopher Pope, our engineer's mother, who turns out is one of our biggest fans. So hello to her. And you've been listening to and watching LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR, the show What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. Mr. Pope, please take us out as you brought us in. And thanks for watching and listening.